We're good to go.
Why don't you start this time, Pat?
Want me to start out?
Sure.
Okay, well, I just want people that are watching, if you're sitting there by yourself, wearing your mask is optional, so it's up to you. Now, to start off with, I want to tell you a story about a fellow that lived near New Paltz. He lived alone, and a friend of his and his wife invited him over to supper. So he looked forward to that because he really liked a good meal and he couldn't prepare one for himself. So he went, and it happened to be in February, and he went over, and on the menu that they had was corn on the cob in February. He was ecstatic. I mean, he really liked that. And he said, "Where did you get corn on the cob in February?" He says, "Well, you may have trouble believing this, but I've got it in my freezer." And they said, "You can't freeze corn on the cob." He said, "Well, I've been doing it for several years and it's terrific." So anyway, he took it to heart. And the next summer, when the corn came on in the New Paltz area, he went out to a local farm and he bought 12 dozen ears of corn. And his intention was to put it all in the freezer. So on his way home, he passed through Dietrich's in New Paltz and stopped at the drugstore and bought one gross of condoms. He spent the entire day boiling the corn, putting a cob in a condom, tying a knot, throwing it in the freezer. What just happened the following Monday, he was driving through New Paltz again, and he stopped at the drugstore for something. And he saw the fellow that he dealt with on Saturday. He says, "Say, do you remember that purchase I made from you on Saturday?" And the guy said, "Oh, yeah." I says, "I'll probably never forget that." He said, "I just want to let you know, one of them was missing." The pharmacist said, "Gee, hope it didn't ruin your weekend." Another story here is about this guy. He was a senior, and he was talking to his 80-year-old buddy, and he says, "Say, I hear you're getting married." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Do I know her?" And he says, "Nope." He says, "This woman, is she good looking?" Not really." "Is she a good cook?" "No, she can't cook too well." "Does she have a lot of money?" "No, she's poor as a church mouse." "Wow. Is she good in bed?" He says, "I don't know." "Why in the world are you trying to marry her?" He says, "She can still drive."
And at night too, right?
I want a couple of shorties here before Dave takes over here. It says, "The nice thing about being senile is you can hide your own Easter eggs." That's kind of a sick joke, I guess. Go ahead for a while.
Okay, so I have some quarantine observations and statements here. So there's some breaking news. You can wear a mask inside your home now is highly recommended. Not so much for the virus, but so you can stop eating. It says here that there's high maintenance women and low maintenance women. Well, this is a good time for low maintenance women because they're having their moment right now. They don't have to do their nails to file them or paint them. They don't have any roots to dye, any eyelashes to do. They're thrilled not to have to get dressed every day. They've been training for this their whole lives. I think when the quarantine is over, let's not tell some people. Not to brag, but I haven't been late for anything in over 6 weeks now. When things open up, maybe next month or the month after, I'm going to stay in place for a while and see what happens to the rest of you guys. Make sure everything is all right. The spread of COVID-19 is based on two things. Number one is how dense is the population. And number two, how mentally dense the population is. We all know people like that. Here's an analogy that I think is appropriate about flattening the curve. You're flattening the curve, the curve is flattening, so we can start lifting restrictions now, is equivalent to saying the parachute has slowed our rate of descent, so we can take it off now. Like that. People keep saying, is coronavirus really all that serious? Well, when the churches and casinos are both closed, so when heaven and hell can agree on something, it's pretty serious. A couple more. So I was in, let's see. For the second part of this quarantine, do I have to stay where I am or can I relocate? I'm just asking for a friend here.
Yeah, okay. I got a story, a golf story, actually. This foursome was playing golf on a Sunday afternoon. It's a course right in the city, and there's traffic going right by the course. And they were on this one green, and this one fellow just about ready to putt. And all of a sudden, a funeral started going by. And instead of putting, he stood upright, took his hat off, put it over his chest, and he stood there with his head bowed as the entire funeral drove by. So after this has happened, his partners are just watching him in kind of amazement. So after the funeral gone by, they said, "Is that somebody you knew?" And he said, rather sadly, "We would have been married 25 years tomorrow." There's some things about life that you should know. Never give yourself a haircut after 3 margaritas.
You could end up looking like one of us.
You need only 2 tools, WD-40 and duct tape. If it doesn't move and it should, use WD-40. If it moves and it shouldn't, use the tape. Everyone seems normal until you get to know them. When you make a mistake, make amends immediately. It's easier to eat crow while it's still warm. If he or she says that you are too good for him or her, believe them. Work is good, but it's not that important. A couple other little things here. This is kind of trivia stuff. Borrow money from pessimists. They don't expect it back. Half the people you know are above average. 99% of lawyers give the rest a bad time. A conscience is what hurts when all your other parts feel so good. A clear conscience is usually the sign of a bad memory. I almost had a psychic girlfriend, but she left me before we met. Oh, well, when everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. If at first you don't succeed, destroy all evidence that you tried. The sooner you fall behind, the more time you'll have to catch up.
A couple of things happened to me recently on a couple of grocery store trips. You know, we got these senior hours, so you go there early. So the other morning, I was downtown. I was in a long line at the grocery store before it opened for seniors only. And this young guy come from the parking lot and tried to cut in the front of the line. There's an old woman in the front of the line. She beat him back with her cane. So he came back again. He tried to cut in again. And an old man punched him in the gut and then kicked him to the ground and rolled him away. He came up the third time and he said, "If you don't let me unlock the door, you're never going to get in." So another time I'm in the grocery store, and there's this crabby older woman. She's giving everybody a hard time. Where's this? Where's that? This is out of date. This. So she goes up to check out, and don't you know, they caught her shoplifting a can of peaches. So after a big kerfuffle, she gets arrested, goes in front of the judge. Judge says, "Well, what do you steal?" She said, "Like a can of peaches." "How many peaches were in there?" 9 peaches. "All right, I'm going to give you 9 days in jail." Anybody have anything else to say to the court? And her meek little low husband sticks his hand up and says, "I think she stole a can of peas too. How many days for that?" Go ahead, Pat.
This is a story about this lady. She had a duck that was not feeling good. So she took it into the veterinarian. It was kind of laying limp in her hands. And she went into the room there and laid it on the table, and it just laid there. And the veterinarian took a look at it. He took his stethoscope and he put it on the duck, and he says, "I hate to tell you this, lady, but your duck is dead." "What do you mean it's dead?" She said, "Don't you have to run some tests or something?" He says, "Just a minute." Pretty soon he comes in this Labrador retriever. This Labrador walked up and looked at the duck, and he sniffed it, and he walked around the other side, and he looked it over very close and sniffed it a couple more times. He shook his head back and forth, and he walked off. And so then the doctor went and got his cat and brought the cat in. The cat jumped up on the table, sniffed the duck, sniffed it here, sniffed it there, looked it over, shook its head back and forth, and it walked off. The doctor says, well, you've got a conclusion, it's dead. And so she sighed with relief. Well, I guess I have to accept it. So he said, here's your bill, $150. $150? You got to be kidding. This is ridiculous. He says, well, just a regular diagnosis, just a regular visit, it's about $20. But for the lab work and the CAT scan, it's $150. Okay, here's some best headlines. Minors refuse to work after death. Well, I guess that's to be expected. Juvenile court to try shooting defendant. Well, that'll take care of that problem. The strike isn't settled quickly, it may last a while. These are all headlines. Cold wave linked to temperatures. New study of obesity looks for larger test group. Astronaut takes blame for gas in the spacecraft. And a couple more here. These are things that little children have learned. No matter how hard you try, you can't baptize cats. You can't trust dogs to watch your food. You can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. Oh, those, I'm sure some have tried. And here's some truths about growing old. Growing old is mandatory. Growing up is not. Forget the health food. I need all the preservatives I can get. When you fall down, you wonder what else you can do while you're down there. And let's see one other little thing here. These are puns, so you can groan if you like, because we can't hear them. Or you can laugh if you want. The roundest knight at King Arthur's round table was circumference. He acquired his size from too much pie. A dog gave birth to puppies near the road and was cited for littering. Two silkworms had a race. They ended up in a tie. A hole has been found in the nudist camp wall. The police are looking into it.
Okay. So this next segment is contributed to us by Paul Farges. Paul has a very big vocabulary, and he's asked me to give some definitions here. Did you know that these things had names? The space between your eyebrows is called a glabella. The way it smells after the rain is called petrichor. The plastic or metal coating at the end of your shoelaces is called an aglet. That's a crossword puzzle word that comes up a lot. The rumbling of stomach is actually called a womble. The cry of a new baby is called a vegetus. The prongs on a fork are called tines. The sheen or light that you see when you close your eyes and press your hands on them is called phosphines. The tiny plastic table placed in the middle of a pizza box is called a box tent. The day after tomorrow is called overmorrow. Your tiny toe or finger is called minimus. It's actually more, but in case this lockdown goes on longer, I'll save these for another time if we get called back. Paul also provided me with a joke about an Irish golfer, from an Irishman rather, and I just gave away the punchline. One day, an Irishman who's been stranded on a desert island for over 10 years saw a speck on the horizon. He thought to himself, it's certainly not a ship. As the speck got closer and closer, he began to rule out even the possibilities of a small boat or raft. Suddenly, there strode from the surf a figure clad in a black wetsuit. Putting aside the scuba tanks and mask and zipping down the top of the wet vest, there stood a drop-dead, gorgeous blonde. She walked up to the Irishman and said to him, tell me, how long has it been since you had a good cigar? 10 years, replied the Irishman. With that, she reached over and unzipped a waterproof pocket on the left sleeve of her wetsuit and pulled out a fresh package of cigars and a lighter. He took the cigar, slowly lit it, and took a long drag. Faith in Bagora, said the castaway. That is so good. I've forgotten how great a smoke can be. And how long has it been since you've had a drop of good Bushmills Irish whiskey? Asked the blonde. Trembling, the castaway replied, 10 years. Hearing that, the blonde reached over to her right sleeve, unzipped the pocket there, and removed the flask and handed it to him. He opened the flask and took a long drink. "'Tis nectar of the gods," shouted the Irishman. "'Tis truly fantastic." At this point, the gorgeous blonde started to slowly unzip the long front of her wetsuit right down the middle. She looked at the trembling man and said, "How long has it been since you played around?" With tears in his eyes, the Irishman fell to his knees and sobbed, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, don't tell me you've got golf clubs in there too."
This little story is about a small fishing boat that sunk out in a few miles off the ocean, off the shore. The boat sunk, and there's 4 survivors, and they were bobbing around in their life jackets. Before the boat went down, they'd raided the Coast Guard, and they're waiting, hopefully, for them to show up. Well, before the Coast Guard showed up, some sharks showed up, and it was a father and a son shark. And as the 2 sharks approached the 4 people floating around with their life rafts on, the father said to the son, "Now, son, when we get there, what we're going to do is we're going to make a slow swim around the survivors with just the tips of our fins showing. Then we're going to make another lap around with our fins fully out of the water. Then in the final round, we're going to swim around them with our mouths wide open and our teeth showing." The son said, "But Dad, wouldn't it be simpler to just avoid all that la-di-rah?" And the father said to the son, "Trust me, son, they taste a lot better with the poop scared out of them." Let's see. I joined a health club last year, spent about $250. Haven't lost a pound. Apparently, you have to go there. The advantage of exercising every day is so when you die, they'll say, "Well, he looks good, doesn't he?" If you're going to try cross-country skiing, start with a small country. Walking can add minutes to your life. This enables you at 85 years old to spend an additional 5 months in a nursing home at $4,000 a month. And here's some things that for people that take life too seriously. Save the whales. Collect the whole set. Honk if you love peace and quiet. Remember, half the people you know are below average. He who laughs last thinks slowest. The early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Get a new car for your spouse. It'll be a great trade. If you think nobody cares, try missing a couple of payments. Hard work pays off in the future. Laziness pays off now. Okay.
A couple more aging jokes. My goal for this year was to lose 10 pounds. I only have 14 to go. A recent study has found women who carry a little extra weight live longer than men who mention it. Kids today don't know how easy they have it. When I was young, I had to walk 9 feet across the shag carpet to change the TV channel. Senility has been a smooth transition for me. I think I'll just put an out of order sticker on my forehead and call it a day. And just remember, once you're over the hill, you begin to pick up speed. You got more?
Yeah, okay.
I got one more page too.
I got a couple more here. These 2 fellows were eating in a restaurant, pretty small restaurant. They were sitting there, and the waiter just brought their meal. And 2 ladies walked in. They sat down at a table pretty near where these 2 fellows were. And in the course of eating the meal, and the ladies finally got their meal and were eating, all of a sudden, one of the ladies started choking and was having trouble breathing. And they watched her for a moment, and one of the 2 fellows jumped out of his chair, and he ran over and he helped this lady out of a chair and stood her up and got around behind her, and he dropped her skirt and he dropped her pants and he licked a cheek on each side. It startled the heck out of the lady, and she got so excited she coughed up what she'd been choking on. And she was very grateful to him, he helped her get her clothing back up, and he went back to sit down with his buddy. His buddy says, "My gosh, that was remarkable what you did." He said, "That's the first time I've ever seen anybody use the Heine lick maneuver." Sorry about that. Not too sorry. Let's see, I got a couple others here. Experience is something you don't get until after you need it. Let's see, I've already read that one. Okay. Oh, here we go. What do fish say when they hit a concrete wall? Damn. What do you call a boomerang that doesn't work? A stick. What do you get from a pampered cow? Spoiled milk. What lies at the bottom of the ocean and twitches? A nervous wreck. Where do you find a dog with no legs? Right where you left him.
What's that? Okay. So there's this guy in Colorado. He's got this sign, this portable sign thing, and he keeps changing it. And somebody has taken photographs of these, and sent me an email. I'm going to read you a few that I thought were pretty catching. Dogs can't operate MRI scanners, but cats can. Our mountains aren't just funny, they're hill areas. Turning vegan would be a big missing stake. Well, to be frank, I'd have to change my name. Life is short. If you can't laugh at yourself, call me. I will. Ban pre-shredded cheese. Make America great again. Electricians have to strip to make ends meet. For chemists, alcohol is not a problem, it's a solution. Despite the high cost of living, it remains popular. Crushing pop cans is soda pressing. In search of fresh vegetable puns, let us know. Big shout out to my fingers. I can always count on them. The problem with political jokes is that they sometimes get elected. Whenever I try to eat healthy, a chocolate bar looks at me and snickers. Swarms of flying insects threaten town. Police deploy SWAT team. And that's all I have. Anything more, Pat?
I got another one.
Okay.
Says, I feel like my body has gotten totally out of shape. So I got my doctor's permission to join a fitness club and start exercising. I decided to take an aerobics class for seniors. I bent, twisted, gyrated, jumped up and down, and perspired for a long time. But by the time I got my leotards on, the class was over. Let's see. I think I had one other little one here somewhere, but I can't find it. Oh, well, here it is, I guess. An Indian walks into a cafe with a shotgun in one hand, pulling a male buffalo with the other. He says to the waiter, "Me want coffee." The waiter says, "Sure, Chief, coming right up." He gets the Indian a tall mug of coffee. The Indian drinks the coffee down in one gulp, turns and blasts the buffalo with a shotgun, causing parts of the animal to splatter everywhere, then just walks out. The next morning, the Indian returns. He has the shotgun in one hand, pulling another male buffalo with the other. He walks up to the counter and says to the waiter, "Me want coffee." The waiter says, "Whoa, Tonto, we're still cleaning up your mess from yesterday. What was all that about anyway?" The Indian smiles and proudly says, "Me training for upper management position. Come in, drink coffee, shoot the bull, leave the mess for others to clean up, disappear for the rest of the day." So that's my advice to anyone who aspires to get ahead.
Thank you.